Guns, Films, and Antonio Vecchiana. Dallas, Texas. Did you ever notice that birds of a feather flock together? Jack Ruby, the hapless nightclub owner, who wanted to spare Jacqueline Kennedy the heartache of a trial in Dallas, had an alter ego that most people would find interesting. Jack Ruby was a gunrunner. In earlier chapters, Ruby's Oldsmobile trunk was filled with armaments and ordnance. During the 1950s, Jack was in and out of Cuba at the behest of organized crime, transporting weapons to the Caribbean island. He knew and worked with Robert McEwen, was in turn friends with Castro, as seen with his friend McEwen on a visit to the United States. Castro and McEwen. Now that everyone has the picture in their mind, Lee Oswald and another man named Hernandez enter upon the scene at McEwen's home near Galveston. So what is Lee Oswald doing knocking on McEwen's front door? Robert McEwen and his wife Ethel. Bayview, Texas. Here is what happened according to McEwen's HSCA testimony, as placed in a narrative in Return to Dallas. A dark-haired man opened the front door. "My name is Lee Oswald. I finally found you. You are McEwen, are you not?" "Yes." "Another phony setup," whispered Patch. Patch twisted the audio gain higher. The tape recorder reels spun around as Oswald spoke. "Well, I have looked for you quite a while, but I am sure that you are McEwen. I understand that you can supply any amount of arms." "Who told you that?" "Guns?" asked Patch. "He's asking about guns." "I'm pretty sure that you can do it," said Oswald. "We are thinking about having a revolution in El Salvador." "El Salvador?" "Yes. It's such a small country that it would be easy to do." The man's voice became strained. "I want to tell you right now here that I am on probation, and I said I am not about to get mixed up in no damned arms of any kind, not anymore. I am in enough trouble as it is. I won't give you nothing. Patch adjusted the amp as Oswald continued. "You could make all this money, Mr. McEwen." "I said I'm not interested in money," he said, raising his voice. "I am married now. I am working. I am trying to do right, and I do not want to get mixed up in anything like this. So that's that. Have a good day." "But, Mr. McEwen, my wife doesn't know any of this. She does not know that I was mixed up in all this mess. So goodbye. This is Mr. Hernandez." "Glad to know you," said Hernandez clearly with a slight accent. "I've heard a lot about you. That's all in the past. Goodbye." Oswald and Hernandez headed back to the car, but Patch could still hear McEwen and his friend after he closed the door. "Sam, ain't that a hell of a mess?" "Mac, don't mess with them." "I ain't gonna mess with them." Sherry hit his arm, and Patch looked up. "Patch, Oswald is going back to the house." Patch kept the tape running as Oswald knocked again. McEwen stepped outside this time. "Mac, would you do me a favor? And it will not involve you in any way. I can give you $10,000 if you can get me 4 rifles. I have the money right in my pocket." "Look, pal. I said no. I would prefer the 300 Savage automatics with a telescope sight." Patch turned toward her. "He wants automatic rifles." McEwen thought for a second. "What do you want with 4 rifles? You can't do nothing with a revolution with 4 rifles. If you get them for me, I would sure appreciate it. I will give you $10,000 if you can get those 4 rifles." Again, McEwen paused and looked skyward before he spoke again. "No way. Just like I told you, I am not getting involved in no kind of arms. Hell, if you want rifles, you can go down to Sears Roebuck and buy them. You can get rifles in any hardware store. Why do you have to come to me to get them?" Oswald looked him in the eye. "You are being very uncooperative and rude. There is no reason for you and me talking anymore. I am not going to fool with any arms whatsoever, none whatsoever. McEwen retreated into the house, and Oswald and Hernandez returned to the car. Patch shut off the recorder, and he and Sherry looked at each other. McEwen wants nothing to do with getting rifles for Oswald. He says you can buy them at Sears. I agree with McEwen, said Sherry. You can buy those guns anywhere. Oswald clearly was sent, by who we don't know. And everyone following Return to Dallas blogs know Oswald was being set up. Can you imagine if McEwen, friend of Castro, had procured a rifle for Oswald, and what if that rifle was placed in the school book depository? Does the word patsy mean anything at this point? Patch tells a Mr. Jim Pearl that he and Sherry want out of the operation. He mentioned there is a possibility that Oswald will meet with David Atlee Phillips. They are to proceed to the Southland building. Says Jim Pearl he is a FBI informant. Dallas Postmaster Harry Holmes. 10 grand. That's right, $10,000 in the Dallas P.O. box. In 1963 dollars. Do you think the next operation is rather dangerous? Watch out for Harry Holmes, says Jim Pearl he is a FBI informant. The Cabana Motel. Dallas, Texas. 1963. David Atlee Phillips, Antonio Vesciana. To be or not to be, that is the question, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to, 'tis a consummation. Hamlet. The former Southland Center. Dallas. Alpha 66 leader Antonio Vesciana made an incendiary statement 2 months before JFK's death. Vesciana was with Oswald and a handler, Maurice Bishop, who was, according to Vesciana, CIA officer David Atlee Phillips. Dr. John Newman's unraveling the Vesciana yarn. Vesciana's accounts have radically changed over the 4 decades leading up to the appearance of his 2017 book Trained to Kill. His first account on March 2, 1976 was given to Gaeton Fonzi, an investigator then working for Senator Schweiker of the Select Committee on Intelligence Activities, SSCIA. That interview occurred while he was incarcerated for cocaine trafficking, an offense for which he still claims he was innocent. 3 months after his parole, Vesciana was interviewed by journalist Dick Russell. Vesciana gave his third account in a 25-26 March 1978 deposition to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, HSCA. The fourth phase of his story took place during the numerous lengthy sessions he had with Gaeton Fonzi during the 15 years between the HSCA's final report, January 2, 1979, and the 1993 appearance of Fonzi's book, The Last Investigation. From Kill the Messenger, Antonio Vesciana, Mystery Man in JFK Assassination, Part 1, by John Newman. At the Dallas P.O. Box. Oswald walks into the post office when Patch is at his P.O. box. He gives Patch a disgruntled look as he passes. To get the 10 grand they need to shoot movie film in some kind of operation. Lee Oswald spots Patch. Chapters 26, 27 and 28 on SoundCloud, and complete book at audible.com. Lemon and lime arrive at the fringe of the JFK conspiracy. Jack Ruby often ate at the Egyptian Lounge in Dallas, Texas, owned in 1963 by Joe Campisi. After the death of Lee Oswald, Jack Ruby was visited in jail by none other than Joe Campisi. The House of Representatives Select Committee on Assassinations believed that Jack Ruby had eaten at Campisi's restaurant the night before Kennedy was murdered. Rumors abound about Joe Campisi's mafia connections. And guess where Patch and Sherry end up after midnight, after the harrowing trip from Las Vegas? The Egyptian Lounge, of course. Jack motions them inside with his head. Campisi is seen on the periphery to provide a general sense of his character and what he does. The steaming lasagna, low light, and Italian music in the background further enhance the persona of the Egyptian Lounge. Joe Campisi. Whether members of the Dallas police force frequented the Egyptian Lounge is not readily known. placement of Jerry at the lounge with Jack as Patch and Sherry eat their lasagna, and the reference to Dallas policeman Pinky Westbrook, Nick McDonald, and Paul Bentley brings into question the logistical involvement in the JFK assassination and the murder of Officer J.D. Tippit. In Return to Dallas, Jack Ruby never mentions anything about the assassination to Jerry, but it's clear something is up. These cops may be a part of something they may not fully ever understand. Jerry Hill, Pinky Westbrook, Paul Bentley, Maurice Nick McDonald. Jack performs his role, obtaining the Edson portable recorder with Bakelite mic and the listening device and camera for Patch. Patch is astounded when another $2,000 is removed from a manila envelope. Jack informs Patch and Sherry they are on board the surveillance now, and they'll blow our heads off if you try to back out. That's a good incentive not to back out. On yellow bonded paper are instructions to head to Austin and meet someone named Max at the 6th Street Bridge. They receive a photo of Lee Oswald from 2 years ago. After heading for the Beachcomber Motel, accommodations provided by Jack, Patch places Sherry behind the wheel as they are chased up the highway. The light-colored Ford station wagon is no match for Sherry's driving skills, and they are able to safely get away. Patch and Sherry don't know that Max is from Army Intel. He calls them Lemon and Lime and hands them an updated photo of Oswald. Max mentions the president is coming to Dallas in November, but the details are not formalized. In his rules of engagement, he instructs them they are to stay out of sight from Oswald. Their surveillance will be a singular operation, with a verbal report on tape submitted after each encounter. Max makes it clear Jack's role in this operation is over, and to stay away from him. A post office box number 300543 has been set up at the Lafayette Post Office Annex in New Orleans for Patch and Sherry. This box is next to Oswald's box at the post office. Lee Oswald. The taped reports and photos will be sent to New York City to a Mr. Ed Torres. Ed Torres was of course the pseudonym for Bernardo de Torres, who was in the thick of the conspiracy with CIA connections. They don't have to arrive in New Orleans until August 2nd, and at 11 a.m. go to the post office box. Max leaves after telling them to wait at the bridge for further instructions. If Max isn't military, then I'm Snow White, says Patch. Funny you don't look like Snow White, Sherry replies. Bernard Barker and Rolando Mosfere. Bernard Barker and Rolando Mosfere approach Patch and Sherry on the bridge. Barker, later of Watergate burglar fame, was heavily involved in the failed Bay of Pigs operation. According to Dallas detective Seymour Weitzman, Barker was the man on the grassy knoll who was showing Secret Service identification and ordering people out of the area. Barker reiterates what Rosselli has said about Patch's courage in preventing the terrorist Carlos Sanchez from killing several mafia leaders. The 59 Blue Chevy. Nags Head. Remember that city in North Carolina. As Patch and Sherry leave the bridge area, a man with binoculars is parked not too far away. Woosley Chevrolet, Nags Head, North Carolina, is stamped on the rear of the car. Patch asks him why he's so far away from North Carolina, and he claims he is bird watching. But Patch, not trusting anyone, notices a tag on the binoculars that could indicate government. Lee Oswald, while in custody, tried to call a cutout in Raleigh, NC, near Nags Head, North Carolina, where the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, had a training site for fake defectors, Oswald's assignment from 1959 to 1962 in the USSR. The Nags Head reference in Return to Dallas is a friendly reminder of the real Lee Harvey Oswald. Patch and Sherry next drive to Galveston Beach for a week of downtime, before they are thrust in the thick of the Oswald operation in New Orleans. Chapters 12 and 13 on SoundCloud, and complete book at audible.com. Let's Make Oswald a Mental Patient, CIA Frame-Up. Chapters 23 to 24. In this summary and perspective, we will see the results of the great investigative work of Jim Garrison's team. All this information was available publicly since the mid-60s. Let's look at this narrative in Return to Dallas with Occam's razor. Occam's razor, the principle, attributed to William of Ockham, that in explaining a thing no more assumptions should be made than are necessary. Patch and Sherry drive the Impala north up Highway 61 for 116 miles. They have instructions to follow Oswald to the parishes of Clinton and Jackson. Patch uses the word Afro-American when Sherry talks about Dr. King's upcoming rally at the Lincoln Memorial. He agrees that King has turned the world upside down, and that he is walking a fine line with his public postures. They talk about how JFK and Bobby are challenging the existing order by their civil rights policies. Oswald gets an important haircut. Lee Oswald wants to get a job at the East Louisiana State Hospital. Stop the narrative, folks. What is the Occam's razor aspect of this statement from Oswald to Barbara McGehee? Why are Oswald, Clay Shaw, and David Ferry 116 miles north of New Orleans? Remember, this is the guy, Oswald, who is pretending to be a communist to wreak havoc on the Fair Play for Cuba Committee courtesy of the U.S. intelligence agencies. And Oswald is with Clay Shaw, no small potatoes, of Permindex, and the CIA. Ferry flew planes, and did all sorts of nifty things for the agency. And little Ole was connected to everybody, and smart enough to have participated in the false defector program in the Soviet Union. Here's the ugly secret. Once Oswald had employment with the East Louisiana Hospital, records could easily be manipulated to patient status. Can you imagine, on the afternoon of November 22, 1963, with the president dead and Officer Tippit murdered, the arrested suspect Lee Harvey Oswald was a patient at the Louisiana State Hospital? The trip up north is less than 90 days from the Dealey Plaza assassination. McGehee tells Oswald to visit Reeves Morgan, the state rep, to help him get a job at the hospital. Oswald later was spotted in back of Clay Shaw's black Cadillac. Morgan informs Oswald that to get a hospital job it would be advantageous for him to be a voter. So they head to the voter registration line back in town, where Oswald is standing in line with black people, flashes his naval ID card. Lee H. Oswald, U.S. Navy ID card. Just a slight observation: does the man in the photo really look like Lee Oswald? Shaw trial testimony. Siambra. Were there many white people in line? Palmer. No others that I remember of. These were the only two that were conspicuous. Very close together. Siambra. When you say very close together, do you mean space-wise or acquainted together? Palmer. There was 2 or 3 people between them. Siambra. So, in other words, you had no idea. Palmer. No idea. Siambra. Whether they were with each other? Palmer. That is right. Palmer said he also noticed an unfamiliar black Cadillac parked near his office, with 2 men inside. Siambra. Can you describe the individual on the passenger side? Palmer. Well, the man on the passenger side, all I can tell you about him, he appeared his eyebrows were heavy and his hair needed combing. He had messed up hair, I noticed that. That is all I could see of him. Siambra. Exhibiting photograph to witness, I show you what the state has marked S3 for purposes of identification, and I ask you if you recognize the individual in this picture? Palmer. I can't recognize the individual, but the hair and the eyebrows are similar. Siambra. Do you know who this person is? Palmer. From the picture I know now. Siambra. Who is it? Palmer. That is Mr. Ferry. This is as close as Palmer came to placing David Ferry in Clinton. He was more certain about the defendant, Clay Shaw. Siambra. Can you describe the man who was behind the wheel of the automobile? Palmer. He appeared to be a tall man. He had broad shoulders and quite gray hair, and kind of ruddy complexion. Siambra. Now, do you see anyone in this courtroom today who fits the same general description of the man that you saw in the automobile in Clinton? Palmer. I would say that man right there, indicating Shaw, has the same kind of hair. Palmer noticed the 2 white men were still in line when he went for lunch at 1 p.m., and the two men in the Cadillac were still parked there. It was after Palmer's 3:30 p.m. coffee break that the white men reached the front of the line. Palmer. Soon after I got back, the first white man came in the office. I asked him for his identification, and he gave me a driver's license from Livingston Parish. His name was Estes Morgan, and he didn't have enough identification to register, because he couldn't prove that he was in the parish long enough, so I sent him out. Siambra. When did the next white boy come in? Palmer. Probably one or two others came between him, and then he came. I asked him for his identification, and he pulled out a U.S. Navy ID card. Siambra. Exhibiting photograph to witness, now I show you a picture that the state has marked S1 for purposes of identification, and I ask you if you recognize the individual in this picture? Palmer. Yes, sir, I do. Siambra. Is this the individual who came into your office that day? Palmer. It is. Siambra. Do you know who is the individual in that picture? Palmer. Lee H. Oswald. He wanted a job at the hospital in Jackson. He couldn't give me any proof that he was living in the parish long enough to register, i.e., 6 months, but I told him he did not have to be a registered voter to get a job at the Jackson Hospital. He thanked me and left. The third Clinton witness, Corey Collins, outside the Registrar of Voters' office. Assistant DA Andrew Siambra questioned Collins about the men in the car. Siambra. Can you describe the man behind the wheel? Collins. Yes, heavy-built, gray hair. I would say he was between 40 and 50, somewhere in that area, and he had on a light color hat. Siambra. Do you see the man behind the wheel in this courtroom today? Collins. Yes. Indicating Shaw. Right here. Siambra. Did you get a chance to see the person on the passenger side of the car? Collins. Yes. I would say he was medium built, but the most outstanding thing about him was his eyebrows and his hair. They didn't seem real, in other words, they were unnatural, didn't seem as if they were real hair. Collins identified this man as David Ferry. He was the only one of the four to positively identify all three men. Last came William E. Dunn, Sr., a Corps volunteer. He remembered the shiny black Cadillac at the voter registration drive. Dunn. I knows one man was sitting behind the wheel, and maybe another one, but I am not sure. Siambra. In the front seat, maybe another one? Dunn. On the front seat. Siambra. But you are not sure about the other one? Dunn. I am not sure about the other one. Siambra. Can you describe the man behind the wheel? Dunn. I can. He was big shoulders, big man, and gray hair. Siambra. Do you see that man in this courtroom today? Dunn. I do. Siambra. Would you point him out, please? Dunn. Indicating Shaw. Right here. Dunn identified a photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald as one of several white men he saw in line waiting to register. East Louisiana State Hospital. Oswald enters East Louisiana State Hospital. Once near the personnel office, Oswald shouted he knew how to use guns. He said he was involved in getting rid of Castro using skills he acquired as a Marine. Did Lee Oswald have any idea he was being set up as the patsy for Kennedy's murder? Not likely. Then what's the deal? Clearly getting him employed or trying to be employed is a fact. And it's also in his instructions to give a bad impression at the hospital, or maybe a good impression for an anti-Castro person. Dr. Silva, born in Cuba, director of the East Louisiana State Hospital at Jackson. Photo credit, Joan Mellon. Dr. Frank Silva and Dr. Robert G. Heat administration of taraxion in humans, May 1959, in the Medical Journal, Diseases of the Nervous System. Also, effects of the administration of taraxion, DLSD, mescaline, and psilocybin to human volunteers 1960 in the journal, Comprehensive Psychiatry. Was Oswald trying to penetrate the plot against Kennedy, or something to do with human volunteers? The Lafayette Postal Annex. Patch sends Newton inside the post office to retrieve the contents of the P.O. box. Just the night before he had dreamt about towering clouds and a long blue car. Guy Bannister is inserted in this fictitious scene for the reader to get the full thrust of his violent personality and to demonstrate his involvement in the JFK plot. Guy Bannister storms from the side. He's been drinking and pushes Patch. He is livid that Patch has broken protocol and used Newton to retrieve the manila envelope. Bannister squeezes the key back in Patch's hand so hard it almost breaks Patch's fingers. That's Guy being Guy. Bannister and Bill Harvey and two Cubans. Obvious Harvey is a big deal and spent most of his time in Rome during the fall of 1963. It is known that Harvey took a trip to Dallas just before the assassination to check things out. Harvey's presence in this scene is a friendly reminder of his complicity in the plot and his operational management. The manila envelope contains another $2,000. Patch and Sherry are to meet a Mr. Jim Pearl at Cabana Motor Inn in Dallas. Then they will proceed south to Galveston to surveil Oswald and Robert McEwen. In Alba's garage to check the tires, Oswald's fair play pamphlet is spotted. They learn that Lee was in the garage all the time when he worked at the Riley Coffee Company and with Bannister at the Balter Building. Oswald always had creased pants when he was supposed to be an oiler at the coffee company. McWillie had called Oswald psychotic, but neither Patch or Sherry think this is the case. Again, someone in the Chevy watching them. New Orleans, David Ferry, and the P.O. Box. Writing a fictitious novel is radically different than the complexity of a historical book. Patch and Sherry's downtime by the powers to be is not written for the reader to take in the beauty of the Galveston coast. Nor is this chapter inserted for Patch to do kissy-kissy with Sherry and tell her how he feels about her. All those aspects work. With history, if you're honestly aligning dates and times with relevant events, you can jump ahead to the important part of the historical narrative, or you can give depth to characters and maybe enhance the story with romance. So, the gap between Dallas and the New Orleans Oswald operations works just fine. Galveston Beach. All of us have been in over our head during our life, but I doubt we've had the likes of Johnny Rosselli, the mob, the anti-Castro Cubans, and the intel agencies put the squeeze on us. Patch and Sherry walk into the Lafayette Postal Annex and approach the post office box. In every assassination book David Ferry shows up. And until recently everyone thought Ferry to be a quirky, high-pitched voiced weirdo. That's not the case. Ferry was ultra-conservative with a baritone voice. And he was intelligent. During the audio recording of Return to Dallas, the high-pitched Ferry's voice had to be changed when a 5-second piece of tape with the real Ferry's voice was unearthed. The transformed voice alters his persona. Ferry, an unequivocal JFK assassination participant, hands Patch a tiny brass key for P.O. Box 300543, next to Oswald's P.O. Box. David W. Ferry. I flew him into Cuba during the Bay of Pigs ahead of the invasion, says Ferry, adding to Patch's lost memories of his past. After Ferry leaves, Patch removes a manila envelope containing $2,000 from the P.O. Box. Patch is indebted to Rosselli for the phenomenal cash flow. The risk of the surveillance and the cast of marginal characters who can easily kill create a constant tension. Another $2,000 for lemon and lime. Eladio del Valle. La Petite Fleur. 9 p.m. August 2nd, 1963. Before Patch and Sherry enter La Petite Fleur, they hear the weird song. It really did make the top 40, Timey Kangaroo Down Sport. I'm not making this up. Eladio del Valle, who will die on the same day as David Ferry in 1967, comes under scrutiny by researchers in the JFK assassination. Del Valle's role in the assassination is very serious business, and Patch having him as a contact is not meant to diminish his importance. Ferry's ties to Del Valle link him to the assassination. Guy Bannister. And not to become farcical, but the rabid anti-communist Guy Bannister, who knew Patch in 1961 in the Kennedy Paradox, shows up at the bar. Bannister's pearl handle revolver is in plain sight. Yet due to his memory deficiency, Patch does not recognize Bannister, which triggers the short-fused Bannister into threatening Patch. Bannister, like Del Valle and Ferry, are on a need-to-know basis with the surveillance operation and the assassination. This is done merely to demonstrate that these individuals, including Rosselli, were a part of the conspiracy. The Habana Bar in 1963. Patch and Sherry, acting on a tip from Bannister himself, walk through the French Quarter to Oreste Pena's Habana Bar. Although this is not the beginning of the official surveillance, Patch and Sherry see their target a more social Oswald than described by Ruby and McWillie, as well as Oswald associating with the very people he purports to oppose. New Orleans is the center of the storm as the book progresses, with the players involved in the conspiracy, many a part of United States intelligence agencies, about to make appearances in the subsequent chapters as the surveillance begins. Postscript. Since Return to Dallas was written, there have been rumors of intel personnel surveilling Oswald before the assassination. Having Oswald surveilled zeroes in on the agency's true motives as they handled Oswald or sent others out to impersonate him. Chapters 14 and 15 on SoundCloud and complete book at audible.com.
16. Oswald no fue a la Ciudad de Mexico. Chapters 37, 38, 39. Fair is foul and foul is fair. Macbeth. On November 22, 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald became a celebrity. A man of notoriety, infamous in his fame. One of the elements of this fame was the report of Lee Harvey Oswald traveling, as an unknown private citizen and former defector to the Soviet Union, to Mexico City just a scant 60 days before the death of John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. Out of the theatrics of Mexico City were spawned the loner communist who created a scene at the Cuban consulate, the belligerent bastard who arranged an appointment with Valery Kostakov, who controlled Department 13, the Soviet Assassination Division. So, what really happened in Mexico City in September 1963? Who is this guy? The CIA said this was Lee Harvey Oswald. Does this man look like Lee Oswald? As chapters 36 to 39 proceed, there are no photos of the real Oswald. Wouldn't the CIA desperately want to cast away any doubt that Oswald was in Mexico City? Let's rewind the clock around a week before the performance in Mexico City. Leaving New Orleans on cue. Why did Lee Oswald stuff his possessions in Ruth Payne's station wagon FOB Dallas? Ruth Payne and Marina Oswald. Why did Mrs. Payne become such a close friend with an unknown Russian woman, drive to New Orleans, and haul this woman Marina Prusakova Oswald and her daughter to Dallas, where she lived in Payne's home until late November 1963? Why were Lee and Marina separated, with Oswald staying only occasionally at Payne's house? These are not casual questions, because they have discrete answers with massive implications. To find these answers, it is necessary to do a little detail work. Who is this woman? Patch and Sherry discuss how Pilatus, after discharging a firearm in the Texas State Bank, must be in federal custody. A nervous Sherry questions whether Patch should capitulate to Pilatus's demand and travel to Mexico City. He is afraid they will kill him if he doesn't cooperate. Before he leaves, he and Sherry return to 4907 Magazine Street in New Orleans, Oswald's apartment. Strangely, Ruth Payne, after a whirlwind trip around the eastern United States, swings into town, New Orleans, in her 1955 station wagon. She is about to transport Marina and her daughter to her house in Irving outside Dallas. Again, a simple question: why? The answer is that she is under orders to separate Marina and her intelligence op husband Lee once they are both in Dallas, Texas, part of the president's itinerary on a Texas trip in 60 days. Ruth and Michael Payne. What we didn't know in 1963. Michael's mother, Ruth Forbes, aligned with the Universal World Federalists post-World War II. The CIA's Cord Meyer was in charge. Michael's birth father, George Lyman Payne, associated with Trotskyist socialist faction. Mary Bancroft. Ruth Forbes and Lyman Payne, close friends to Mary Bancroft, a well-connected spy and World War II lover of Allen Dulles, fired CIA chief. Cord Meyer and Allen Dulles. Cord Meyer and Allen Dulles were aware of Ruth and Michael Payne. Dulles knew Michael Payne as a youth. Sylvia Hyde Hoke. Hoke was naval intelligence. A CIA employee in 1961. Air Force secret clearance. CIA memorandum. Ruth's father, William Avery Hyde. The Agency for International Development, AID. Ohio Governor and AID Director John Gilligan. CIA agents from top to bottom. CIA considered using William Hyde for covert use in 1957. A strong anti-communist. Ruth Payne helped Oswald get the Texas Book Depository job, thanks to a tip from neighbor Buell Wesley Frazier's sister Linnie Mae Randall. Here is something even more intriguing. Less than 90 days before the assassination, Ruth Payne's vacation began in Massachusetts. She visited Michael Payne's mother at the Forbes family home on Nashone Island off Woods Hole, Massachusetts. She traveled to Philadelphia and Washington to meet with her sister and hear Dr. King give his historic I Have a Dream speech. To Indiana, where civil rights workers had been killed. And she drove to her mother's house in Columbus, Ohio. To her college Antioch in Ohio. Naturally, Marina Oswald was next on the agenda in New Orleans. Gives new meaning to the name Fast Friends. Note, the Secret Service told Marina, because of Payne's CIA connections, not to hang out with her pal Marina. Patch and Sherry heard and record the whole conversation as Marina and Ruth Payne leave in the station wagon. Oswald leaves New Orleans, but there is no record of where and how he left. Patch will travel to Mexico City, all the while searching for Oswald. Once in Mexico City, he will look for Oswald as per Pilatus's directive at the Cuban consulate and the Russian embassies. But he must stay in the shadows. They find out that the Dr. Alexander Moon of 1967 know where they're staying. A greasy-haired man closes Lee Oswald's P.O. box. He and a group of Cubans cash Oswald's check at the Winn-Dixie. Laredo, Texas. Patch and Sherry travel to Laredo. Sherry is concerned for Patch's safety. Oswald is not on the bus and Patch leaves for Mexico. Near Monterey, where the bus lines cross, Oswald's name is not on the bus manifest. Neither is the name Heidel. A wiry blonde-haired guy talked with a couple from England. He blurts out that he may go to Cuba, and that he's the secretary of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. He also speaks with an elderly British man. Then he continues as he speaks with two Australian women, and says he's from Fort Worth, Texas. He brags about going to Japan while in the Marines. He talks about being in Russia studying. Someone has gone to the trouble of impersonating Oswald.
Pilatus and the Massive Information Dump. Chapters 34, 35, 36. Utilizing a Wendy's hamburger ad of the period, Vice President Walter Mondale, during a presidential debate, asked Senator Gary Hart, "Where's the beef? Where's the beef?" Chapters 34, 35, 36 bring a plethora of beef and JFK assassination abnormalities. There are hundreds of conspiracies in the Kennedy assassination, but believe me when I tell you, there are no coincidences. Chapter 36 should be read more than once, and the names sourced are all persons of interest. Thomas Beckham. Specifically in Chapter 36, there is an interconnecting group of people on the edge, and sometimes within the assassination plot. Questions abound. Why is Tommy Beckham, gopher for the Marcello organization traveling with the Dealey Plaza storm drain plans to Dealey Plaza, exactly where Kennedy will be gunned down. Visitors to the Marquette Building, 17th floor. Ray Gill and Carlos Marcello, Jim Braden, Dave Ferry. In Marcello's personal attorney Ray Gill's office, Patch encounters Dave Ferry again, along with a mafia associate Jim Braden. In the fall of 1963, Jack Ruby calls New Orleans many times before the assassination. Oswald leaving New Orleans for Dallas at the end of the month seems to be part of a plan. The timing is no coincidence. September 17th, Oswald and another man enter the Mexican consulate. The other man, John C. Gaudet, is sponsored by the intelligence community. That's right, the intelligence community. Everyone in the exile community is talking about Castro assassination plans, but what if those plans are turned back on the United States government? Please keep that in mind. U.S. government assassins turned against the President of the United States. Pilatus unloads information and bails out. Welcome to the West Texas town of El Paso. The real Nagel stayed at the Travel Lodge in El Paso, the setting for Pilatus to carpet bomb Patch with both ancillary and direct information concerning the plot against the president and the background of dozens of people. The real Nagel went about his business in El Paso and was subsequently arrested. The Travel Lodge, El Paso, Texas. Here is a laundry list of the Pilatus information dump. This is 90 days away from Kennedy's death in Dealey Plaza. Info dump and Oswald's nebulous past. The 1959 Chevy from North Carolina is from Naval Intelligence because Oswald has been with Naval Intelligence for a long time, and one of his calls after being arrested is a roundabout phone call from Dallas Police Headquarters to the loop that includes Naval Intelligence. Although this is fiction, it reminds everyone of the presence of Army intelligence in the events leading up to Dallas and incidents in and around Dealey Plaza on the 22nd of November. Pilatus tells Patch directly that he met with Oswald last year in Mexico City. Pilatus is playing both sides. He wants Patch to travel to Mexico City. Pilatus has known Oswald since the 50s. Lee Oswald frequented the Queen Bee, an intelligence hangout in Atsugi, Japan, according to Pilatus, when he and Oswald were in the service. Patch is Pilatus's insurance policy because of the information dump. Lee Harvey Oswald at the Bronx Zoo. The intelligence people want to portray Oswald with psychological problems. Dr. Renatus Hartogs, who observed Oswald as a youth, was government all the way. He was at Montreal's Allen Memorial Institute, where Dr. Ewan Cameron had his excesses. Cameron received funding from the Army Chemical Corps and the CIA to conduct drug experiments on unsuspecting patients involving LSD and mescaline. What is Oswald doing? Lee Oswald was anti-communist. Oswald's favorite TV program growing up was I Led Three Lives, a spy program against communism. Fred Chrisman. Tommy Beckham's handler is Fred Chrisman, who was linked to Intel. Pilatus has a uniformed services identification and privileges card in the name of Lee Harvey Oswald. This information opens a Pandora's intelligence box. Oswald works for Naval Intelligence, ONI, and Guy Bannister was with ONI in World War II. More intelligence operations, the Fair Play for Cuba Committee pamphlets, and Oswald on the radio was a Dave Phillips project. Army intelligence has operatives like Oswald all over the country to make the FPCC look bad. Then they will hand all the information to the House Un-American Activities Committee. The CIA knows all about the Oswald facade. And it was James McCord, later a Watergate burglar, who launched a counterintelligence program against the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. William C. Sullivan, FBI Domestic Intelligence Division, and others have set up this operation against the FPCC. Hoover's right-hand man Cartha DeLoach supervises it all. The overall FBI disruption program is called COINTELPRO. Sergio Arcacha Smith. Arcacha Smith and Q, along with Ferry, have convinced Oswald to get sucked into this, playing both sides. The radio guy Butler is an intel asset too. Oswald reported everything to the FBI agents in New Orleans. He meets Agent DeBruys at the customs house off Canal Street. Oswald is playing too many games with too many people. Pilatus was supposed to get $500 to Oswald, but it will be mailed to his contact in Mexico City. Oswald just wrote to the Socialist Party of America, saying he and his family are moving to Washington in October. Sac de Bruy said how passive Oswald was when he was arrested in New Orleans. Oswald set up the whole incident. Most importantly, Pilatus claims to have a tape recording of a conversation between Lee Oswald and himself, as well as a photograph of Oswald with him in Jackson Square in New Orleans. CIA agent Gary Aberdeen is bringing it all together. And Oswald is still informing to the FBI on them. The FBI knows everything. The Paynes are not an average couple. Oswald and his wife Marina have more handlers. Ruth and Michael Payne, Mrs. Payne's husband's stepfather, invented the Bell helicopter. He controls a big Texas industrial and military supplier. Ruth Payne's father is a collateral intelligence contact. He worked for the OSS in World War II. Ruth Payne's sister is a psychologist for the CIA and her husband an asset. Mrs. Payne is supposedly a Quaker. Her family is tied into the Forbes family with a circle of friends that includes Alan Dulles. Mrs. Payne's garage in Irving has filing cabinets full of letters, maps, records, and index cards on pro-Castro sympathizers. The exiles want Castro dead. Kennedy has sent out peace feelers to Castro, and the military and intelligence agencies are furious. Eladio del Valle acquired transceivers and rifles. He's done business with Traficante ever since he was in Cuba. Someone is calling Mexico City from a New Orleans motel saying they are Oswald. Pilatus explicitly tried to warn Oswald he was being used by forces he could not begin to understand. But he just seemed unconcerned. Ferry calling Chicago. Wanted to talk to a Jean Warren. Chicago WH4-4970. She is friends with Lincoln Myatt, who knows Jack Ruby. Oswald is government. There were many more indications that Oswald was government. Oswald worked at the company in Dallas that did the map overlays for the U-2 flights over Cuba. The owner of the Riley Coffee Company in New Orleans, where Oswald worked, is a CIA asset. That man, Riley, funds Arcacha Smith and the exiles. The vice president of Riley Coffee is a former FBI agent. And Howard Hunt controls the whole CRC. The CIA sent Oswald to Russia, along with a dozen other guys. Oswald defected and had secrets about the U-2 and threatened to give them to the KGB. Oswald was held in Minsk for weeks, and then 6 months later the U-2 is shot down. A tourist card has been issued for Lee Oswald in New Orleans. Oswald went into the Mexican consulate and got the tourist card. The man in front of Oswald, Gaudet, is a CIA operative. Last June, Oswald was given an instant passport when his background demanded legally that he never get a passport. Oswald in Minsk. Oswald almost blew it on the radio with Stuckey. He said while in Russia, he was under the protection of the American government, and then quickly changed it to he was not under the protection. Oswald just waltzed back into the country with a Russian wife. And they illegally give him a passport. Vice President Johnson's man, Baker, is about to blow the whistle on LBJ. Pilatus pressures Patch to go to Mexico City. Pilatus tells Patch a Form FM-8 has been issued at the Mexican consulate in New Orleans under his name. They note they must have thought he was a smart guy to surveil Oswald. He thinks Patch is working with Escalante and Castro. Pilatus wants Patch, on Thursday, September 26th, to meet Continental Trailways Bus 5133 coming from Houston, and leave Laredo for Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. If Oswald is not on that bus, then someone is doing the double shuffle. May involve Army intelligence. Patch to get a detailed check on the people on the bus, and the manifests in Mexico from Nuevo Laredo to Monterrey. See if this individual is really on the bus. You know exactly what he looks like. Someone at a very high level has set something in motion here. Inserted into LIENVOY. It's a communications intelligence game. And everybody in Mexico City will try and ferret out the mole responsible. Before Patch leaves Laredo for Mexico City, he will send in a sealed envelope a yes or no, whether Oswald is on the Mexico bus. Send to 3751, 6th Street, Los Angeles, California. Nagel's mother's address. Find out if he gets to Mexico City. Find out if Oswald arrived there by some other means. Car, plane, train, etc. Get proof when the time comes that he was or was not in Mexico City. In Mexico City is the important operative and Goodpasture, aka R.B. Riggs. She's circumventing Win Scott, the station chief in Mexico City. Because she works for Staff D part of ZR/Rifle, the assassination division. Patch must check the Russian and Cuban embassies. Check the bus line. Even the manifest if he can see it. Pilatus says he will bet his next year's salary that Oswald will never show up in Mexico. Pilatus gives Amshale one's Army intelligence number from the 902nd Military Group. Code number DUP 748. Pilatus says Patch has no idea what's happening. The entire infrastructure has been long in place. It's just a matter of managing it. Hoover will get it. Richard Helms and Phillips will know soon enough. And Hunt sure will make up something. Alan Dulles is gone, but he probably knows. They all know about Oswald's dubious identity from way back. Even Bobby Kennedy knows about Oswald. A footlocker that will give Patch background on Oswald information that will put in perspective this whole operation. The tapes and photo from Jackson Square is there also. And documents and recordings from high up. Note, this fictitious footlocker is another device to bring forth information in the book. Patch will later go to the Dobbs House family restaurant for the key. He will go to the restaurant in North Oak Cliff at 1221 North Beckley, order pancakes, and ask for Cindy. Patch will tell her, Joseph Kramer sent me. She'll get him the footlocker number, key and address. Pilatus's intel operatives want a record of Oswald, or a fake Oswald trying to get to Russia via Cuba via Mexico City. Pilatus's operatives need to get the whole picture about what's going on. It's very important. Pilatus to eject himself from the operation. Tells Patch to be at a discreet distance from the Texas State Bank late that afternoon, and you'll see what it's all about. Even though it's going to be hot as hell here today, Patch and Sherry should just pretend they are shopping. Pilatus's orders from the Soviets are to kill the illustrious double-triple agent Oswald with his .45. He won't follow those orders. He's dropping out. He hopes Patch doesn't get killed. As for Pilatus, he'd rather be arrested than commit murder and treason. Pilatus glances in a variety of directions before he returns to his two-toned Fairlane. JFK at the UN overturns the military and the Pentagon. And, for the first time in 17 years of effort, a specific step has been taken to limit the nuclear arms race. I refer, of course, to the treaty to ban nuclear tests in the atmosphere, outer space, and underwater, concluded by the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and already signed by nearly 100 countries. It has been hailed by people the world over who are thankful to be free from the fears of nuclear fallout, and I am confident that on next Tuesday, at 10:30 o'clock in the morning, it will receive the overwhelming endorsement of the Senate of the United States. Pilatus takes himself out of action. Pilatus enters the Texas State Bank and soon fires a shot. He walks outside to his Fairlane in the alley. A cop appears and raises his gun as he rushes the Fairlane. Pilatus lifts up his hands and spoke clearly, I guess you got me. I surrender. He's gotten himself arrested, said Patch. And we don't need to be in the middle of this.
The wonderful land of Oz. I live there too. Creativity, innovation, persistence. Steve Wozniak is one of my favorites. Did he have the pizzazz of Steve Jobs, that uncanny ability to sell a product, an idea, a concept? In his own way, he did. That's not why I'm writing today's blog. I'm actually being a bit sneaky in this blog. I'm talking on the phone last week with one of my old friends, and the subject of Steve Jobs and Steve Jobs and, come on, Fitton, one of your favorite people and you can't remember his last name? Bad show. I'm picturing Woz's bearded face and his smile, him constructing the guts of the early personal computers. My friend is hesitating also, and then begins Wozniak's name. I quickly mangle Woz's name and we both finish at the same time. No denigration intended, Woz. This does and does not have anything to do with my books. I remember what it was like to pound away at the typewriter. Make a mistake, you get the white out. And then wait for it to dry, maybe with a hairdryer. Later on, a white ribbon to hide the mistake and not have to type the entire page again. Although I've done that too. And what if there's a huge problem with the novel? You're screwed. Without the computer revolution, I would be typing this and a few locals might read it. Now I can correct, insert, paste, revise, and delete. What would have happened if a typewriter key fell off? Steve Wozniak is an introvert. So am I. What does that mean? Is he antisocial or a recluse? No way. Wrong to all the above. Let's hear what Wozniak actually says. I don't believe anything really revolutionary has been invented by committee. I'm going to give you some advice that may be hard to take. That advice is work alone. Not on a committee, not on a team. Steve Wozniak. I hear you, Woz. I was in outside sales most of my career and wrote during the off hours. Some people are ambiverts in the middle of extroversion and introversion. It can get complicated, but found sales meetings with extroverted partygoers to be sometimes overwhelming. Although I developed an outgoing sales approach and thoroughly enjoyed the good and bad customers, I needed to recharge. I still think that most people have no idea what I'm talking about. Time out. People are complex with a variety of different aptitudes. The introvert-extrovert is one part of that complexity. A big part. If I looked at a circuit board in 1975, I would have said, hey, that's really cool. Steve Wozniak looked at the board and changed the world. You're a hermit, you're a recluse. What's the matter, don't you like people? Let's party. Now wait a minute. Partying and being out are fine when I want to. Introverts can be very social, some not as much. Introverts can have fun when we want to. I think understanding the basic difference between people helps to see their perspective. Thank you, Dr. Young. I learned to talk left, right, up, down, and occasionally be funny. A tremendous asset for the recharging introvert. I also knew what was going on inside my head, although I may not have had the terminology. For instance, in a long drawn-out sales call, being at my sprucey best, explaining with enthusiasm just what I can offer, I feel my brain calling out to me, time to come home and rest for a while. I quite often would shoot photos between calls. I have a library of books. Thomas Jefferson said, I'd rather be shut up in a very modest cottage with my books, my family, and a few old friends, dining on simple bacon and letting the world roll on as it liked, than to occupy the most splendid post that any human power can give. There's a picture of me and 3 more cases of books not in the picture, a huge amount of books. If you're an extrovert, you might say, yeah, right, turning to his left. Who gives a shebang? At sales conferences, I would go jogging or biking between meetings. I guess that was like recharging the cell phone. Biking? Too much time to think, Fitton! When I return from exercise, I'm recharged. Sounds simple, but it isn't. Carl Jung said, each person seems to be energized by more either the external world, extroversion, or the internal world, introversion. 1/3 to 1/2 of all Americans are introverts. Say what? Now back to our story. Early on, Woz and Bill Fernandez used punch cards and chips to build a computer until a reporter blew it up by stepping on the power cord. Fernandez introduced Woz to Jobs, the extrovert. Secrets of the Little Blue Box, October 1971 issue of Esquire. The industrious Woz builds blue boxes and Jobs sells them. You can see where this is going. In 1973, Jobs worked for Atari. He's assigned to create a circuit board for the arcade video game Breakout. The Atari offers $100 for each chip that was eliminated in the machine. Jobs makes a deal with Wozniak to split the fee if Wozniak could minimize the number of chips, which he does, by 50. 1975, Wozniak tests his first working computer prototype, and a character was displayed on a TV screen from a home computer. Woz brings the computer to the Homebrew Computer Club, a Palo Alto collection of electronics hobbyists enthralled by computers. Here's their newsletter. April 1st, 1976, Jobs and Wozniak formed the Apple Computer Company, now called Apple Inc. Then just Apple, after Jobs returns from an apple orchard in Oregon and tells Wozniak about his time spent on it in an apple orchard. The personal computer revolution begins. Word processors were just coming out when I wrote the freebie, The Ram Damar's Kingdom. So, for some lunk-headed moronic reason, I wanted to stick with the typewriter. And today I still have that typewritten manuscript. I didn't get a computer until my friend shipped me an IBM XT in the 1990s. It was like dying and walking into heaven where God says to you, "Where have you been?" Steve Wozniak didn't personally design the IBM XT, but he did start the ball rolling. My output soared with the computer. Errors were easily corrected. Stories could be readjusted. Wozniak did hook up with IBM in 2009 for some targeted work. Well, dang. Here's a good line from the band AGR where Ryan is bemoaning his dating life and speaking to his not-yet-born child, Winter. He says in the song Dear Winter, lyrics by Ryan Met, "Dear Winter, I'm looking for your mom. I gotta find a girl that doesn't mind I'm inside my head a lot. Winter, it won't be too long. First, I just gotta find your mom." I get it. He's inside his head a lot. So I salute the joining of introverts and extroverts, and the need for introverts to retreat back into their head. Yeah, I was sneaky by bringing in Woz, but it all makes sense to me. How about you? RPF. Postscript. For all introverts. Carl Jung used the term introvert and extrovert 100 years ago. There are two personality types, and they get or spend their energy in different ways. Introverts, Jung said, turn to their own minds to recharge, while extroverts seek other people for their energy needs. Jung, him smart guy. There's a video here of a stop at Willoughby on the Twilight Zone, and my caption is, can sales pressure get a little bit too much for introverts? Sometime.
Push, 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 push,
Richard Kane and Escape to Tampa, Chapters 31, 32, 33. One fact is clear when Patch and Sherry walk into the Chicago restaurant. Richard Kane does not like Patch. Through his mother, Kane had become welded to the Giancana organization in Chicago. He is an ultra-serious man who does not have time for frivolous conversation or double-crossers. It is only because of Johnny Rosselli's word, trickled down to Kane, that he agrees to see Patch and Sherry at all. Even mob attorney Frank Ragano vouches for Patch, but Kane just does not take kindly to Patch. He leaves the table to call Rosselli directly. Dining is a very serious business. The outfit's secret agent Richard Kane, left, and North Side boss Ross Pryor, right. Patch is asking about Thomas Arthur Valle. And Kane erupts and wants to know if Patch knows the Secret Service agent Abraham Bolden. Patch realizes they have made a huge mistake in coming to the restaurant. Kane goes wild when Patch asks about Lee Oswald. He orders Patch to be brought upstairs by a guy named Switch. More mob goons show up and Patch is smacked around. They want to know if Patch knows about an operation in Mexico City. Kane did electronic work in Mexico City years back. Somebody has given Kane information, and he does not seem to concern that Patch has been beat up. A 1962 Ford Falcon driven by Valle, license plate 311 ORF, is registered in New York to Lee Oswald. Kane tells them that Oswald was in Chicago last April with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Significantly, Patch learns that Valle is being funded by Tony Verona and his anti-Castro Cuban buddies. 1962 Ford Falcon license plate 311 ORF. Kane just leaves. No apology. No explanation. Nothing. The manager of the restaurant later appears with airline tickets to Tampa. As they leave, Patch doesn't know it, but they have just avoided being arrested by the FBI. R.D. Matthews. R.D. Moynihan. R.D. Matthews lived until age 92 and oddly died when the Moynihan portion of Patch's journey was written. Matthews was a large-framed mob tough guy in real life who was mourned by his family when he died. Moynihan provides a venue to protect Patch from the intelligence agencies, and the contradiction of the respected tough guy liking Patch is similar to Braden's thoughts about Patch. Word has seeped into the common chit-chat of Patch saving the lives of the mob bosses in 1961. The Kennedy Paradox. John Martino. John Martino was an electronics expert for Santo Trafficante. He spent time in jail with Mr. Trafficante after the Castro Revolution. Martino in return to Dallas relays critical information about Bill Harvey and the Kennedys. We hear how Bobby Kennedy humiliated Sam Giancana in front of a congressional committee. Martino's character also sings the praises of Johnny Rosselli. He tells Patch to lay low. And he clearly shows how he loathes JFK. Martino says, as he did in real life, he's going to be hit. Cash is changing hands. The legendary Bill Harvey. Sherry says that Rosselli is the hub of the wheel.
Arriving in U.S. mail from St. Louis, in the original de Havilland DH-4 biplane, and 10 bulky gunny sacks are the combined audiobook renditions and supplemental background information as presented in podcast form by moi, me, Robert P. Fitton. Good evening to one and all, wherever in the galaxy you make your home. In this episode, broadcast from the 46-foot-high control tower at Storybook Junction, I have an announcement. I want to talk about my books. Hey, I know. In the past, I've carpet bombed this podcast with snippets and driblets of audiobooks, and that's really wonderful, Bob. Right. Hogs up the hard drive. It does hog up the hard drive. Too much material for a meager broadcast. Now look, I have over 50 books, and I probably should talk about them, you think? Let's bring the Fitton on the Air spinning wheel into the control tower. Hannah will haul it out here. Okay, let the thing spin and we'll stop at a book at random. Unless I don't like it, of course. But I like all my books, even the free ones from way back. I don't have Vanna White, but I do have Miss Hannah Blight. Hannah, would you spin the Fitton on the Air spinning wheel? How about please? Okay, please, pretty please, with horseradish on it. Hannah, of course, is a cousin to Nurse Mildred Ratchet. Hannah can bench press 600 pounds of cheese puffs in a single bound. Okay, here we go, round and round and round over all them thar books. All those years of stories written on the East Coast, the West Coast, in longhand and shorthand, in pencil and pen, flare and marker. With manual and electric typewriters, IBM XTs, CompuServe, HP, and Dell. Are you done? Yeah, I'm done. Where did it land? Oh, well, the book is I Have Seen the Future. You've changed it from 1939. I like 1939 better. Okay, Hannah, you can go back to wherever it is you came from. Get out of here, come on. Sorry about that. Good help is hard to find. Okay, 1939 / I Have Seen the Future. I'm going to follow the humanity viewpoint here. I could talk about straight technology, and perhaps I will at another time. When I say humanity, I'm talking about how we treat each other, better called the dignity of man. The future postulated in the book is horrible, basically because humans are not in charge. It's the seraph who dominates several versions later of the internet, and thus everyone on the planet. Control and domination of groups of people is nothing new in the history of planet Earth, so I don't think I'm stretching the speculation with this storyline. There's a look into the distant future, too, and it's not too pretty with humans retreating across the solar system from the seraph. Andy Reese. Andy Reese is not goody two-shoes. Andy Reese is not some genius who figures it all out and what's happened to the human race. It is this natural evolution of technology, the technology revolution as posited at the 1939 World's Fair in New York City. It can go either way, boys and girls. I'm just sending up warning flares to what it could be. The evolution of artificial intelligence to become more powerful than humans would not have happened spontaneously. And that's true of any evolving technology. I would ask, what technology today has evolved where there is an element of control of our everyday lives? Just television is an example of luring humans into the virtual two-dimensional world, which is fine as long as the viewer is able to bounce back to his or her real world. And what about the metaverse? Don't even think about it, or maybe you should think about it. Think about what it would be like just being in that total world. It may sound good. What about phones? Wow, I'm checking my email. I'm skipping over what I might want to watch and to listen to something through the portal of my phone. So what's wrong with that, Fitton, you may ask? Nothing. Unless the technology has diminished my so-called humanity, right? And what about FaceTime? That's a good choice because you're checking in and making contact. If I was constantly in the middle of a perpetual video game, some of them involving killing other humans, it would not be a good thing. So who am I to pontificate? Again, I'm just sending up flares, not thinking. Think. Aside from all my technological castigation, look, in the end, letting technology totally control your life is self-destructive despite the lure. But here's what to keep in mind when Andy is back in time at the New York World's Fair in 1939. Look at all the futuristic pavilions, the inventions, the dazzling presentations, all geared toward the future. The freeways constructed in the General Motors Futurama, Electro the Robot, RCA Television Broadcasting, FDR. Everything, after enduring most of the Great Depression, is geared toward progress. Progress is good, but the character Dr. Herman Geiger is the primary force of caution. And Lucy Appel, the young woman, exceedingly bright, encounters reality. I won't get into the aliens in this book, but I will say they are like the old Microsoft DOS, unforgiving and only capable of their own programming and limitations. So I'll end this podcast before I fly out of here by just saying that one word, knock dinkum. Just think. I'm Robert P. Fitton, climbing aboard the plane and flying back to reality. Healthy ride! All of my books are available in paperback, Kindle, and audio at www.fittonbooks.com. And here's a real nifty factoid. You can listen to all my audiobooks without interruption on audible.com. Just type in Robert P. Fitton.